This section we're gonna talk about briefly the globalization process that has occurred again post World War II, and the science and technology trends we see in the 20th century overall. So again, as we have done several times now, we're going to go back to World War II and see how the world in Europe has changed following that big catastrophic war. Again, with the development of atomic science, we see in the lead up to World War II, and evidenced by the development and use of the atomic weapons in World War II, we see lots of governments continue to push science, pursue the development of science, and emphasize science to not only improve warfare and the strength of your military, but to also make your government and country more efficient, more wealthy, and more powerful. Again, this has been an ongoing process since the 1600s, and that we see European countries and their governments pursuing science to enrich and strengthen their nation. This trend only increases today. So we see following World War II a massive amount of spending by governments, particularly by America and the Soviet Union, on science and technology, particularly science and technology based around weapons and military strength. Radar, atomic weapons, rockets, jet aircraft were all developed to pursue military strength and military might. This leads in the preceding year, in the years that follow World War II, the development of big science. Big science is the industrialization of science, large scale scientific spending, and progress that is made in this area to try and again make your government, your economy, your society focused on science and pursuing science in order to make your military and army stronger. This happens in Western Europe, and this happens in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, with the Soviet bloc and East bloc and everything, we see again consumer goods and things overlooked in exchange and in favor of these economies pursuing weapons and things like that to keep up with America and the West's development of their weapons and their militaries. But we see the governments across the globe, from superpower to superpower, focusing on science and development of science. A quarter of all men and women trained in science were employed full time to create weapons. So again, some scientists, some people that are employed are, producing some medical benefits or some other scientific discoveries. But a quarter of all people employed in the fields of big science were focused on developing weapons that can be used against other humans. This intensifies during the space race of 1957. We see a competition between the Soviets and the Americans about who can get the furthest in space and who can be the first to get to the moon. In the early years, we see the Soviets make several advances. They're the first to send a man into space. They're the first to launch a satellite. The order there is reversed. And they're the first person to have a cosmonaut circle the globe. America founds NASA a year after Sputnik in 1958, and they quote unquote win the space race by landing astronauts on the moon in 1969. Interesting fact here about Yuri Gagarin. Here, he was a survivor of World War II and the atrocities that were committed against the Germans, against the Eastern Europeans, and by the Slavic peoples of Eastern Europe. He hid from Nazis, grew up in a peasant village, worked his way from a small peasant farmer into being a celebrated cosmonaut. That is still remembered in Russia today, even though the Soviet Union no longer exists. Just again showing you how meritocratic at times the Soviet Union was, and how you could really work your way into whatever you wanted to be in the Soviet Union. Sometimes a lot more easily than what you could do in the West and in America, for example. We see the development of computers continue in this period, grow and continue. You see the British Colossus computer used to break German code during World War II. The development of the transistor allows computers to be smaller and replace these computers that were used with vacuum tubes. Imagine that your computer that you're maybe looking at this on right now operating on a series of vacuum tubes. I don't know how that would work even. But eventually, you see computers get smaller, more efficient over time until you can more or less watch videos on them and hold them in the palm of your hand, which is what we have today. One last point about this before we move on to globalization is the Green Revolution. This sounds like a environmental thing, and environmentalism is a part of it. But we see the Green Revolution really come into place as science and computers and radios kind of get more and more efficient, more and more modern. We see the Revolution come into play. This is really just arguably another third agricultural revolution in which farming gets more and more efficient with better machines, better technology, and more efficient growing of food. You need fewer and fewer farmers, fewer and fewer land to feed a growing world population, to the point where some of these countries, that could, were experiencing famines decades before, now are producing excess food that can be shipped and exported across the globe to feed the rest of the world. America, other big bread baskets are able to do this, and feed a large growing number of people that are living in the world. Going along with this is the idea of globalization. Globalization, again, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism, especially after the neoliberal revolution in the 1980s, we're seeing the world economy become more and more tied together. With free trade agreements such as NAFTA and the creation of the European Union, we're seeing cities and countries specialize in certain things, such as London, Moscow, New York, and Hong Kong becoming global financial centers. And we're seeing countries, such as Eastern Asian nations like Japan and South Korea specialize in electronics. America specialized in production of arms and weapons, in addition to food. China becoming the, quote unquote, factory of the world. All of this is happening due to globalization, in which these global economies are becoming more and more connected by trade, by financial agreements, and by loans and things like that. So all of these economies are becoming connected. So if one country experiences an economic catastrophe, there's a good chance that economic catastrophe could spread across borders and impact other nations, as we've seen time and time again since the 80s, since the 90s, since 2008. With COVID, we saw that as well, even though that's a little bit different there. So we see these neoliberal policies of lowering social spending, lowering healthcare spending, lowering the spending the governments do on their people. That is happening across the board for the most part, and we're seeing this new idea of this working class that's happening, where the people in the first world, in Western Europe and America, they're living the life of the global bourgeoisie, and the developing world, from Asia to Africa to South America, they're producing a lot of the goods that we consume in the first world. This is kind of, sounding a little bit like Marx here. Marx's predictions about how the global economy would lead to the development of a global underclass that would serve the global bourgeoisie, which is what we are experiencing more or less in America. With this globally connected economy, we're seeing, again, countries specialize in certain things. America does not really make anything anymore. China and Asia and parts of South America, they make a lot of our goods that we ship in and buy and consume. In America, we have lots of office jobs, lots of service jobs. We don't have too many factory, good producing jobs, leading to something called deindustrialization. Lots of deindustrialization in America, lots of deindustrialization in Western Europe, and for the most part, Eastern Europe, for good measure. Again, there has been some attempts to rectify this and change this. You see countries try to implement tariffs to protect their home industries, their home factories, but it's to be determined if that will be successful. For the most part, there's a way to do it. I don't think any government is kind of going in that correct direction at this point. Nevertheless, as we see the economy kind of stay in the same state that it's in, we're seeing goods interconnected. So look at this story here. You can see a German Volkswagen car, a historic German car that has been produced for decades. It can be sold as a German product, even though it contains parts an assembly happening in Tennessee in America, South Korean steel, and Taiwanese computer chips. So again, a truly global product that combines Europe, America, and East Asia into one thing. Here you see this with McDonald's. After the fall of the Soviet Union, you see neoliberal policies and capitalism flood into the Soviet Union, and along with that comes McDonald's. Mikhail Gorbachev was in a famous Pizza Hut commercial right after the fall of the Soviet Union, showing you just how quickly global capital was to kind of overtake these formerly communist states and kind of spread its influence in those regions. So that's the globalization and the scientific developments in the 20th century. One last note, I forgot to mention it here, but we do see Operation Paperclip. We talked about that earlier, but Operation Paperclip, in which the Soviets and the Americans scooped up a ton of these Nazis and forgave them of their Nazi sins and used them to develop science and make scientific discoveries in their nations. That happens as well, and that is definitely a part of big science in this period. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you next time.